Good evening, viewers. I am Devan Sangvi, and it is with great pleasure that I would like to welcome you to the second talk of Architect Summit's Talk with the Top series. Architectural technology is a vibrant and upcoming topic. This year's theme for the summit aims to provide the stakeholders with a platform to express and explore the integration of technology in architecture and design, and also spread the ideas of innovation, sustainability, and advancement. For this much awaited talk, we have the renowned architect Ms. Brinda Somaya with us. She is the principal architect and co-founder of Somaya and Kalappa Consultants, Mumbai, and an urban conservationist. She is currently the chairperson of Board of Governors for School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, and is one of the 20 professionals in the world to be awarded the AD White Professorship at Cornell University. She has also been awarded the honorary doctorate from Smith College. With more than 40 years of experience, she has worked for corporate, industrial, and institutional campuses, as well as public spaces. Her notable projects include the rehabilitation of the Badli village of Bhuj, the TCS campus in Mumbai, the BITS Pilani campus, and the Nalanda International School in Baburao, amongst many other projects. We are honored to have you for this talk, ma'am.
Good evening, Devansh. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you today, and good evening to all the listeners, young architects or engineers, or whoever is there. Technology, of course, is most important, or else I would not be able to speak to you today. So in these few months of the pandemic, I've had to hone my skills very fast to be able to communicate with all you young people out there. So it's truly a pleasure to be here, and I wish the summit all the very best. Your topic is very interesting and very pertinent. But you said something interesting in your write-up where you said that integration of technology with unconventional fields. I would like to say here that architecture, being the mother of all arts, apart from being technically very important, has always integrated itself with technology in many, many different ways. It may not be so apparent as scientific subjects, but it's an underlying presence which is very important. So it's a good, interesting topic that you've chosen today.
Once again, I welcome you to the chat, ma'am. We shall now move on to the questions. Having a very successful and distinguished career in the field of architecture for the past 40 years, can you tell us about your journey and what was the purpose with which you started in the field?
Well, I'll begin with a few slides, if that's all right. It might just give me a second. So, can you see it?
No, ma'am.
Oh, you can't yet see it? Just a minute. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll begin with a few slides. This is a picture. I thought I would tell you a little bit about my personal journey. That's me right in the middle with my hand on my hip. I was 8 years old, and my father had taken all of us to Nalanda, the famous monastery and university in Bihar. And just looking at those wonderful ruins and the history of that place, I think that was the day I decided that I wanted to be an archaeologist when I went there. And subsequently, I became an architect. I think I wondered how I would be able to just dig up ruins in the hot sun, and decided to take an easier route. But of course, today archaeology itself is so different because of technology. Again, coming back to technology and all the equipment that you have, you don't have to dig anymore to find things. Where with instruments, you can actually pick out and understand what lies below the earth, whether it's pyramids, whether it's in South America, whether it's India. So things have changed so much over the last many, many decades.
Yeah.
This, of course, is my student life in a way. I studied my architecture at the JJ College of Architecture. The picture to the upper left shows one of the classrooms. This was perhaps the early 70s. We were just 10 women in the class, 10 girls as we were known then, and about 60 boys. So you can see all of us in the first row. Things have changed
Yeah.
considerably, I'm sure. And the picture to the right is when I graduated with my master's degree in the United States. And the third slide, which I'm going to show you about the journey before we can talk about other things. The picture to the left is really where I began my studio. It was in an old Mali's shed. It was one little room, and my sister and I actually first started it. We had one person who used to come for half a day, and then we sort of grew over the years. And you can see in the middle, it was a lonely 10 years. There were very few women in the profession. My sister moved back to Holland, so I was actually all alone. The middle picture
Okay.
shows when I went to Russia and I built a hotel in Russia in 1990. And that was the first time I met women who were structural engineers, MEP engineers, and I realized that the rest of the world, we had a lot of women in these sort of professions. And the picture down shows me at one of our sites. And to the right is me and my daughter Nandini. She's a lawyer turned architect. And now for the last 13 years, she has been working with me. So it's been wonderful for me. I can spend my time doing many, many other different things that I've always wanted to do.
Nice. All right. So, yeah. In 2014, you were the first woman to become the recipient of the Indian Institute of Architects Baburao Mhatre Gold Medal for lifetime achievement. Can you tell us how the inclusion and importance of women in this field has changed, and how has the increased inclusivity helped the field?
So I think architecture around the world was very much a male dominated profession. In fact, in the United States, it was actually known as a white man's profession because, leave alone women, it was people of other races very rarely went into architecture. So it was almost considered, in a way, in the West, sort of elitist profession in some ways. India was different in not that many ways because, as I mentioned, that there were very few women in my class, and certainly the 10 years when I really began my practice, which I would say would be 1980 to 1990. I don't think there were many women who were actually running their own practices. So it was very, very lonely. And that made me decide that I needed to do something about this. So subsequently, I started something called the HECAR Foundation, which is an acronym for Heritage, Education, Conservation, Architecture, and Restoration. And in 1990, I thought I would organize a conference to find out what women were doing in this field. And I wrote out to a lot of women and I said, send me back information. But the only thing must be that you're working in your practice alone. You're not working with a father or a brother or a husband. And I got absolutely no response, which showed how few women were actually able to work independently in the profession or even work for any other organization. But 10 years later, that was in 2000, I decided to try once more. And the change was enormous. I made one variation. I said this time, even if women were working with their husbands or fathers or brothers, if there were projects that they had done themselves, which they considered their projects, their clients, their supervision, their design, their supervision on site, then they should send it to me. And we had a huge, huge change. And through the HECAR Foundation, which of course has brought out many books, as you can see, I chaired the first conference called Women in Architecture in 2000 plus. And it led to a lot of interesting things. We made it the women of South Asia. We had the first woman architect of Pakistan to come, Yasmin Leri, who just won the Jane Rue Prize. The first woman of Sri Lanka was not alive, but her representative came and presented her work. And for the first woman architect of India, who was Perrin Mistry, her brother came and presented her work. So it was a unique conference and exhibition, and people, women connected with each other. We had men and women, of course, coming there. And over the next 20 years, I thought people would take it further, but everyone kept coming to me and saying, ma'am, when are you organizing another one? When are you organizing another one? So this January, we had Women in Design 2020 plus, and the change was incredible. It was an international conference. We had women from around the world. We had brilliant women from India and from every country, USA, Europe, Australia, Africa, who came and who excelled in the field of architecture, construction, other aspects of design, film, graphics, because we realized that design is interconnected. Architecture has expanded its breadth, its bandwidth, so to say. And today, women can be architects, but can go into so many other related fields.
There has definitely been a change over these years on the women inclusion included. So, going to the next question. The vision of the Architect Summit, summed up in a few words, is to bring together architects, engineers, and technology. This is what modern architecture and design looks like. And what are your thoughts on this, and how has this been reflected in your work?
Well, I've never thought of my work as being separate from, broken up into these different compartments. For me, my practice over 40 years, we have built in every part of India. India is a massive country with a multiplicity of civilizations. It's complex in geography, in culture, in language, in food, in religion. And we have built my studio, we built from the Himalayas down deep south, from east through central India, through the tribal areas to Gujarat and to Kutch. And this has been the greatest gift that architects have, that they can travel and work in different parts of our great country. So I believe that technology has been integrated into my work, and it doesn't always mean high technology. I believe that technology can be of a vernacular type. It can be a technology of wisdom, of ancient wisdom that we have. So technology is something inherent in us, and of course, the technology that you young people think is technology. So technology can span many, many different things. So the important thing is, what is the role of the architect? We became activists because we have to protect our built and our unbuilt heritage. And I will show you what role with a couple of projects where the technology may have played a role in it. We fought for our cities, we fought for our open spaces, but we built for the rural and urban population. Because if you take the population of India, hardly 2% use an architect. So how do we become more relevant to society? We don't want to be peripheral to society. So we built appropriately. So to build appropriately, you have to think in a particular way. You have to think in a sustainable way and use technology within your design and the way you think and work.
Right. So, you've designed various technological campuses and also some glamorous buildings. From many such projects, which projects do you consider your most notable ones and why?
Well, like a mother with many children, you can't ask which is your favorite child, but I have chosen a couple of projects to show you today. I've divided it into four parts: a few conservation projects, a few contemporary projects, a couple of city projects, and then a couple of community projects, because time is, of course, and we have to have time for questions, etc. So I believe in a country like ours where we have over 10,000 monuments, the Archaeological Survey of India cannot look after them. So every single architect has to also be a conservationist. You can be an urban conservationist, or you can conserve all our wonderful buildings and history that we have over the country. But we should not think of ourselves as just architects for new work. Of course, we must do new work as well, because that gives a different sense of satisfaction. But
right,
we must think of re-architecture, where we change the use of an old building and make it relevant for today. We must retrofit our old buildings. We must repair our old buildings. We must reuse our buildings, and we must restore our buildings. So each practice, each one of us has a moral responsibility in this country to conserve the embodied energy that we have within these buildings. And that's what sustainability is about. Sustainability is not about building a glass box and then using a
right,
certain type of glass or a certain type of air conditioning and saying that now it is listed and it is certified to be a green building. This is where I feel technology can be actually detrimental to the way architects think. We have to design in a correct way. We have to treat the land carefully. We have to position the building carefully. We have to decide where the openings are. We have to decide what materials we use. So that's what is important. So, how do you balance your knowledge as an architect and not get carried away by technology to say that you're conserving something or that you're being sustainable?
right,
So, just to show a couple of things, in the city of Mumbai, we restored the St. Thomas Cathedral, upper left, and the Rajabai Tower and the University Library on the right and bottom right. It was you can see the beautiful, magnificent roof that we restored after about a year and a half of working very, very hard on removing the layers of paint, etc., that had come on it. And to the left is interesting because this was the headquarters of Tata Consultancy Services, where we kept the entire shell of the building, but the inside of the building was not in a good shape. So we had to actually break down the inside and rebuild it from bottom up without disturbing the four stone walls of the building at all. The reason why we did this, these people may have said, okay, we'll break down this building and build something to feed our ego and build a nice new modern glass box. But this building was in a historic part of the city of Mumbai. It was in a corner. It had a history. It had a sense of place, a sense of time. And this is what's important. It had embodied energy. So we saved the entire building. We rebuilt it from inside. So that's what's retrofitting. St. Thomas and Rajabai Tower were very, very important. So those were
right,
actually conserved and,
mm,
restored to their original
yeah,
context. And then we come to another restoration project, which is very important for architects. If there are any architects listening in today, which was the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. This was a building complex designed by Louis Kahn, the famous American architect. And we won the restoration. You can see in the left the rectangle. We won a competition to restore what's within the rectangle. And why it's so important is that these are not 200-year-old buildings or even 100-year-old buildings. These are 20th century architecture of India. And
right,
we must understand that the importance of 20th century architecture is huge. Not necessarily just Le Corbusier and Louis Kahn, but even other architects, Indian architects or others who have built. And by restoring this library, which you see in the center, which we finished, and for which we won the UNESCO Award of Distinction. And what was really important for us, we won it just last year, was not that we won an award, but because it sent out a very powerful message to architects and to conservationists within our country and to owners of different buildings that we need to conserve what is also modern. And now we have
right,
gone on to the second building, which is the faculty building. So these are a couple of pictures. I did a lot of research. Upper left, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where the Louis Kahn archives are, and found these wonderful archival photographs of how the building was constructed. You can see the bottom left, women working. And of course, today I may not have time, but I have always been very involved with protecting construction labor, both men, women, and earlier even children on sites, making sure that they had proper conditions to work. And you can see when it's not done, the present situation we've had with COVID-19 and what migrant labor has had to go through. We hope that, this will never repeat itself. So these were some interesting. Here, of course, technology played a very important role. This shows, how you make mock-ups and how you study them. But IIT, we are working, in fact, with IIT Madras, with Dr. Professor Arun Menon and his team. For all these buildings, they are working with us for the seismic analysis and ensuring that these buildings are safe. As you know, they're in seismic zone. So Arun and his team have been wonderful. The picture to the right shows you the IIT analysis for earthquake, and the photograph to the left shows you technology at work, in the sense we do a lot of semi-destructive and non-destructive tests. And we are able to do that without breaking any part of the building through technology, through different
Right.
equipment and material. So technology has always played an important role within the architectural context. It's not something new, or it's not something that's just come into being, but it's an integral part of it. It's not separated. So, shall I go ahead with the next part, Devansh?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay. So, a couple of contemporary architecture, contemporary and modern architecture is also very fulfilling for us. Greenfield projects are important because the creativity that comes from that is very, very different. Just
Okay.
four pictures I've shown. We do a lot of campuses, both information technology campuses, we do educational campuses. The top left is the Zensa Technology Campus
Mm.
in Pune. And then top right is a school, the Nalanda International School I mentioned to you about when I
Yeah.
was 8 years old. And many years later, when a client came to us from Vadodara and said he wanted to build a school called Nalanda, naturally I used a lot of brick. The bottom left is the Goa Institute of Management, which is on a beautiful hill in Goa. And the bottom right is well under construction. I brought it because we are doing several buildings for the IIT Bombay. And this is the
Oh,
sign building incubation, and it's going to be ready. We got a little delayed because of the pandemic, but it will shortly be
right.
ready. So, new buildings are very, very important for us. I've chosen just one to go into little detail. This is the Tata Consultancy campus we designed in Indore. It's on a 100-acre plot, and it's about 1 million square feet. And we had to design it for 15,000 engineers for BPO and for IT
Right.
work. And now looking back, because of COVID, it's so important that we designed it the way we did, because we designed it so that it's inside, outside sort of campus. It was a very flat piece of land. So the decision we took was to take an idea of the Narmada River, because architects use references of land, of geography, of culture. They need context. Context is very important for an architect. And sometimes when a land is very flat and doesn't have any special features, for me it was important to get a context from some metaphor that was connected with
Right.
Indore. And the Narmada River, of course, is very close. So we studied the river because the river flows long. It was one of the few rivers which flowed east to west. It started, of
Oh,
course, right, up in Amarkantak. The bottom right, you can see the temples there. And then it flows through the wonderful Jabalpur marble rocks and ends at the Gulf of Khambat. So we use that idea to, let me go back one. We use that idea, you can see on the top left, as though the river was flowing through the campus, and we worked the buildings around the river. So we had the upper course, the
right.
middle course, and the lower course of the river. So everybody, it was not huge, two big blocks of buildings, but they were lower buildings, and we are grateful to a client who is able to appreciate what we are trying to do. So there was continuous interaction between the inside and the outside for these youngsters who sit in front of their computers, like I'm sure a lot of you do, for hours and hours and hours, and needs that inside outside feeling as well.
Right.
So the buildings start slowly at Amarkantak, then they get jagged as they come through what we consider the middle course, and then open out to the Gulf of Khambat. Now to come to urban India, I thought maybe you'd like to ask some questions about the city
Yeah.
or
Yeah. So First of all, these projects were indeed a treat for the eyes. Uh, One more conscientious problem that India in particular is facing is urban planning and the lack of urban planners in India. We might also blame this problem for the catastrophic effect of the pandemic. What do you think is the reason behind the deficient number of urban planners, and how can India tackle it?
Deficient number of what, Devansh? I missed that word.
Deficient number of urban planners, man. Urban planners.
Urban. Urban planners. Okay. Um, that's a tough question. There are no easy answers for that. I think politicians and bureaucrats have to be more aware of the importance of architects and planners when they are doing their different plans and bring us into the context. Uh,
Right.
many schools have now started urban planning, but there are huge problems, as we know, and very often we are not part of the story. For instance, we know about Dharavi to the right, you can see it.
Yes, ma'am.
And for the last 16 years, talk has been going on about what should be done there. Many architects have given good solutions. Many schools of architecture in Mumbai have come out with research and good solutions. But unless there's political and bureaucratic will to
Hmm.
change and provide these people what they genuinely and should get, there's not going to be any change. Today, I read in the papers that the government is planning to build housing for migrant labor. So I hope this pandemic will bring some change to this and some sense of uh, haste to hurry up and do some of these things, because these were all disasters waiting to be happen. So we have by 2020, which is this year, we have housing shortage of 30 million units. We need water connection. We need access to sewage. Power is, of course, being addressed. Vehicles are increasing fivefold. So I hope that this pandemic will bring to people that we have to decide that certain parts of our cities cannot be have to be pedestrianized. Now, the city of
Right.
Mumbai, for instance, the center of the city of Mumbai, often they go on widening the roads more and more because more and more cars are coming. I mean, there's no end to this. Now they're even hitting at heritage buildings in the central part of the city and wondering how to take that to broaden the road. I mean, there is a limit. People have to understand, like they do in other parts of the world, like they do in Europe. Why are European cities so beautiful? Because they preserve their centers. They've not let their centers get demolished. They preserve the
Right.
architecture. They preserve the courtyards, the plazas, the piazzas, the restaurants where people can come and sit. We have one little gateway of India Plaza, and pretty much that's it, and the Oval Maidan. So, and then we bring in all our people from the train. You can see the picture to the upper left, and I'll come to why I'm showing that to you, but you can see the crowds that come over there. So by 2050, we have 700 million Indians who will be inhabiting cities. And this movement from rural to urban India is the largest urban movement in the world. And however much we develop our rural areas, this movement to cities will always take place because the cities are the center for what people believe will be their aspirations fulfilled. And there will always be this movement. So we have to address urban India very seriously and very fast. This is Mumbai, which you can see. So, what is a city? What should it be remembered for? There should be equality in the cities. I think the pandemic has shown the total inequality we have in our cities. Today, I'm able to talk to you sitting, working from home very comfortably in my apartment, having a laptop and a broadband, and I can talk to you. Schools have closed. I know so many people who work connected with us, who children don't even have a phone. How are they going to work online? How are they going to be able to study online? And unless equality comes in, we need to really wonder how we're going to do this. We have to have adequate infrastructure, but the right type of infrastructure. We have to have a
Right.
sense of belonging. Because if we don't have a sense of belonging, we will not look after our cities. And all our
Right.
cities now, people have realized, which I think architects knew for decades, that our cities are full of migrants. and the sense of belonging of migrants. They come and go. So how do you give them a sense of belonging? For instance, Mumbai, they should feel that Mumbai is their city, not when something
Right.
happens that they have to leave the city and go back away. Of course, they go home, but they go home usually to farm. They don't go home because there's a problem in the city. They go home because they didn't feel the city was their city. There was no sense of belonging to the city. And of course, a sense of place. Here, architects have an enormous role for a sense of place, because how do you create that sense of place? Architecture is one way, buildings, very, very important way to create that sense of place. So,
Right.
this is one project which I'm showing you for the city, where
Okay.
Professor Chevy and myself and our team, we worked on something called the Mumbai Esplanade project, where we suggested to the city of Mumbai that we have lakhs of people falling out of Churchgate Station and VT Station every day, and they fall into the street. So if we could take the cars underground in those areas, and like we do in the West, and create a connection of all these Maidans, right from BT right down to Regal Cinema, the entire city, north south, you can see the picture to the left, and create
Yeah.
magnificent plazas. We would actually create 50 acres more of open space for our people. It went so well. We got a lot of support from everyone, but there was no will. Again, unless the bureaucrats and politicians want something to happen, it's not easy for us professionals to make it happen. So, you young people, we can suggest some ideas, but we can't do everything. So, I'm sharing all this with you because I want all of you young people who are listening to this to take all these ideas forward from you for your cities. You have to work hard. This should be some of the goals that you have in mind. It can be a small project, it needn't be as big as this. But whatever you take up, finish it. Once you do one small project, you will get the confidence that you can do any project for the country. And that's what's really important.
Right.
Now, the
Adding,
last, yeah.
yeah.
Now,
Adding to
Devan,
the question, how sustainable do you think are India's cities, towns, and villages today?
this is these sort of questions are very broad, Devansh. There are no easy
Right.
answers for this. The government keeps talking about smart cities. Now, what is a smart city? Very few people really know what does it mean. It doesn't mean that you suddenly become very high tech. A smart
Right.
city should mean that you use technology to make a city sustainable. That's what, and how do you do that? You must use technology to make sure your electric power is, whether you use solar, whether you use any other way, how do you bring in the electric power to the city? How do you take
Right.
care of floods? How do you bring water supply to the city? How do you take care of the sewage? How do you take care of the garbage? These are some of the main things in a city. Now we know medical aspects. How do you make sure you have adequate infrastructure for hospitals, for nursing homes, for small clinics, education, schools? So, health, education, and infrastructure. That's what makes a city great. That's what makes a city sustainable. And
Yes.
with that, you have the architecture, you have the culture, you have the context, you have film, you have drama, you have music, you have theater, you have all the other wonderful shopping and the malls and the movie theaters, the restaurants. That's what makes great cities. So
Right.
sustainability doesn't have one easy answer. Sustainability works in different ways for different needs.
Right. Thank you for the very insightful answer, ma'am. It has been more than 4 months now since the 24th of March, the day the country first went into lockdown. According to you, how has the pandemic affected the architectural community?
So I want to read for your listeners um, a saying that Arundhati Roy, the architect, she's an architect, but now she's of course better known as an author and an activist.
Oh,
And
okay.
she says about the pandemic, which I think is very important. She says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks, and our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So I hope she reflects exactly what I believe in. That I hope this pandemic will change the way we think, will make us understand more what is it should be the way ahead for all of us, older people like me, but most of all for young people like you. And I think that can only be something good if it comes out of these 5 months that all of us have been in this pandemic. Personally, my studio, we were very blessed. We anticipated the lockdown was coming. So a week before the lockdown, we decided to move all the computers to each one's home, and including the service providers. We worked everything out. So for the last almost 5 months, we have been working, I have to say, very hard and very efficiently from our homes. It's been a new experience for me. I've become much more tech savvy than I used to be, perhaps, because I'm all alone. So there's nobody. Of course, I can get help on the phone, like Devansh knows. But otherwise, it's been a different type of communication. We see each other on the computer much more, in a way than sometimes I would be able to see in the studio, because I would be busy with so many other things. So as I read Arundhati Roy's quote, that's what I want you all to take forward. So I come to the community now, the importance of working for the community.
All right.
This one project I'm showing you for the community, it happened, the big earthquake that took place in Kutch. And I had a client for whom I was doing many other projects. And the moment this earthquake happened, um, they phoned me and said, we've got to help. We have to find a village that we're going to take care of. And it was a Friday, it was Republic Day. I remember 26th of January. And I live on the ninth floor. And it was the first, actually, there was one other earthquake I felt many years ago of Latur, but this was sort of a much bigger one. And there was total destruction. We went round, finally, we found a village. That area, Kutch, has a Muslim and a Hindu population. So a lot of the Muslim majority villages were taken over by many Muslim trusts, the Hindu majority by Hindu trusts. But we found this wonderful village which had a sort of a Hindu and Muslim, more or less 60-40, and it had not been taken up by anybody to restore. And when I went there soon after the earthquake, it was in complete rubble. You can see this picture of
I can
India.
understand.
It was a map of the school on the school wall, and you can see, of course, all the stone behind, and you can see the cracks and the condition in the bottom right picture. And it was very, very sad to see what had happened. But we sort of, coming to technology, it was a very different type of technology that we used, but we built very
Right.
sustainably. For instance, when we went and we found all the rubble, we immediately collected all the rubble, kept that aside. We kept all the doors and windows also aside, so that we could reuse all this material when we built for them anew. So there was complete recycling of all material, unlike many other government connected projects. Now, this is what happened in Latur. You can see
Okay.
what when a village gets destroyed, a piece of land is taken somewhere else, and identical houses are just built in a line. But people don't want to go and live like this. People want to stay in their same piece of land. They want to have their same
Right.
neighbors as they had before. And India is a very complex country. Villages are also complex. People live in certain groups, and you cannot change everything overnight. So we were very clear
Okay.
that this is not what we wanted to do. We didn't just, although all the houses, 90% had completely gone, we did not want to go and find a piece of land and build a whole lot of houses which look like this. So what we did was we chose a plan, and we went round from house to house, found out where they actually lived. We made detailed maps, detailed planning, and we actually rebuilt each house in its original place. And the people who lived there said they were quite happy. It was cold, it was December, but they said they would be quite happy to be in the cold air outside until their new houses were built. So
Right.
we also built a school. You can see the children. The school had been completely destroyed. Now this is a picture you can see of the research that we did. There were 324 houses and 1,500 people. We had to reconstruct 124 and repair the rest. So there was a temple in the village, there was a mosque in the village, there was a well. So we reconstructed houses in this organic way. They lived in this organic way. They had cow shed, they had goats, they had animals. So you can't just move them to something across the way. So for architects or engineers or anybody who is connected with doing something for society at large, ask the right questions. Go out and ask the people who are they are your clients. Your client is not the one who's giving the money only. The client is also the person for whom you are building. So go out
Right.
and ask them, what is it you want? What is it that you need? And bottom right, you can see a little a plan of a school. There was a very small school. I showed you the picture of the map of India. And the farmer who had his piece of land next to the school actually gave us his land and told us to build a bigger school so that the village could have a good school.
Nice.
So this is the village. After you can see many houses we reconstructed, and to the left you can see the by we put back the original door, and we built those otlas so that people could add on. We of course structurally rebuilt with earth, making it earthquake proof. The tiles we sort of stitched each tile to the other because this area also have cyclones. We didn't want the tiles to fly off, and we encouraged all these people to also do the artwork and paint their houses
Right.
because that was their strength. That's what they loved to do. And this
Right.
is a picture of the school. It was very simple. It won the Fiden Atlas for one of the best buildings of the 21st century. It's a very simple school with a very small budget, but it was great fun to do. And strangely enough, we were four women who were very, very connected with this project. To the extreme right was the Sarpanch of the village. She was a very tough lady, and I had to show her all the plans of what we were doing. And when I would go, she would make me sit on a charpoy, and then she would bring some purple drink out for me to drink. And separately would be peanuts, because a lot of peanuts grow in that area, and raw mango cut. But this purple drink, I used to be petrified because, to drink water and traveling to the rural areas, I was
Right.
always a little scared. But Madam Sarpanch never took her eyes off me. And but for her, we couldn't have done it. The lady next to her is the Swati Dalal who funded, she and her husband funded this reconstruction. And then there's me, and the lady to the extreme left is a lady who actually located this village for us, who found the village. She runs her own NGO, ran her own NGO in Kutch. So we four
Right.
worked very hard together, which was great fun. And this is important for me because I've been connected with the village from 2002 till 2020. So this is Mezzabine in 2002 when I first went. She was a little girl and her house had been totally destroyed, and she was sitting outside on the ground, but she was smiling. And that's when I decided that we had to rebuild the houses how they wanted. And that's another long story because it's complex. And when I went back in
Right.
2006, Mezzabine, the school, we had finished constructing the school, so Mezzabine was in school. And in 2016, Mezzabine had finished school. And when I went, she was actually had gone to the next village to go to class 12 and study further. So these are some how the village has changed in 2016. You can see they do a lot of bandhani work. So you can see they have the dish aerials. Bottom, you can see cars have come in. To the
Right.
top right, I had prepared some documents to show them how we restored the village. So Mezabine is there with her family looking at the pictures. And the bottom right is a school today with its computers. So how if you just give a helping hand, like they say you shouldn't give someone fish, you should teach them how to fish. So similarly, all we did was we were enablers. We were catalysts in enabling this to happen. We were facilitators, and then the village takes it, and then look where they've gone, so
Right. Yeah.
that's what you need. You have to hear what they need, what they want, and then they will take it up further.
Yeah. Your work for the village is commendable. For this, we will now show you a video for the rehabilitation of the Badri village.
It's a short video that we ourselves have made, SNK has made, so it's not a professional video. And it just shows scenes from the village.
We will take a few questions from the audience now.
Sure.
How has architecture changed in terms of approach and demands since you began your career and the present day?
Well, I think when you use the word architecture, it can mean many things. So architecture is a reflection of a country, actually. It
Right.
reflects the country's political, cultural, economic conditions. So
Right.
I think what we have to say is how has architecture in India changed perhaps post independence? So if you divide the, I think now 70 years that we have into decades, and then take three or four main areas, you can take, for instance, political changes. What have they been? Economic changes, cultural changes. With each set of those changes, architecture will change. So soon after independence, we still had, when Nehru came, he had his 5 year plans. He believed that we
Right.
had to have a reflection of a new India. So he brought in Corbusier and people like that to build Chandigarh. He believed we had to break from the colonial masters that we had had for many, many decades. So for about 10, 20 years, 30 years after that, we had then, of course, the Indian masters came in. Many of them had worked with Corbusier or worked with Louis Kahn. So you had Balakrishna Doshi, who, of course, just won the Pritzker Prize and who's
Yes.
93 and still working in Ahmedabad. We had Charles Correa. And we had many, many Kanvinde, Anant Raj. We had many masters of architecture who built during those decades. And the modernist period, they broke with what had gone before, and they were considered the masters. And we had several women also at that time. And they are not often spoken about. But I have done a lot of research, and that's come out in a lot of our women in architecture books that we bring out. We have Yuli Chowdhury who worked, we had Perit Bistri who worked, we had so many women who also worked during that time. So that was that period. Most of the jobs at that period were government jobs. You know, they were building embassies or building big educational buildings. But India was very isolated when you came to the 1970s, say, after this period. And then we had the emergency also, where we were really cut off from the world. And that's the time when people of my generation began to practice. It was a difficult time. There were a lot of shortages. We didn't have computers. We didn't have internet. We didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world except through phone calls or
Right.
newspapers. So it was a difficult time to work. But my generation, people who are in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, it had to slowly India began to grow economically in the 80s and then 90s, and then projects started to grow. And now, of course, the whole country is was open. Now, of course, the pandemic has
Yes.
hit us,
Mhm.
but there's so much opportunity now. We have 1.2 billion people. We are growing. We have economic strengths. Infrastructure is growing. So architecture will also change. So that's the political aspect. Then you have the cultural, the economic. What is it? What are the aspirations of people? What is it
Right.
that people want? And people now are much more sensitive to sustainability, to build carefully. What are the materials that they use, not to waste, and sort of embodied, not to let embodied energy be wasted. So it's architecture is actually a complex profession in the
Right.
sense, when I say complex, I don't mean in a negative way, but it sort of strides many, many different verticals. And that is why you need to have technology, science, and the arts, and which the new education ministry is now hopefully bringing out.
Yes.
So there's no easy answer. But of course, change, they say change is the most change, there's always change. That's one thing that doesn't change. And we know that.
Right. Uh, your work on restoration of St. Thomas Cathedral is well known, for which you won the UNESCO Asia Pacific Heritage Award. What were the challenges and takeaways from that project?
Well, the challenges in any restoration project, whether it's St. Thomas Cathedral or whether it was the Rajabai University, we won the UNESCO award for that also, is that these are both what we call grade one buildings. That means you have to conserve and restore them very, very reverentially, because we're not
Right.
changing the use, and we have to keep the use as it was, as a church or as a library, and we have to restore it very, very carefully. Now there are many charters. You have the Venice Charter, many charters of restoration as well. But we also have to see, how do we work in India? We have limited budgets. We have to work within the budget and time. So we have to be very realistic how we work, and we have to work with our client and with a lot of common sense, a lot of technical knowledge,
Right.
a lot of emotion. And St. Thomas Cathedral had many different things because it had we had to restore the original roof, which was in a very bad shape over years of change and which was leaking. And we also had to take care of various the glass, all the stained glass had broken, so we had to restore all that. We had to bring back the original colors. So many
Right.
structurally we had to strengthen many parts of it. So each restoration project brings its own challenges, and there are many.
Agreed.
Yeah, restoration and conservation is a, but I believe any practice, I always say we have the 5 C's. We have contemporary work, we have conservation, we have
Yes.
connection to the city, we have cultural work, like we do a lot of exhibitions and museums as well, including we just did India and the World, which was a very big exhibition. And then community, what is our responsibility to the communities where we live?
So this was our last question from the audience. Coming towards the end of the talk, amidst this pandemic, what is some piece of advice you would give to students, specifically the ones who are graduating this year?
So I am going to read, if I can just find it in a minute. I want to read something that um, Charles Dickens wrote in
Sure.
1859. He
Yes.
said in the book called A Tale of Two Cities, he said, "It is the best of times, it is the worst of times. It is the age of wisdom, it is the age of foolishness. It is the spring of hope, it is the winter of despair. We have everything before us, we have nothing before us." So I think that sort of tells you that it is a difficult time ahead, but it's also a challenging time. And for young people, I want to end. There is a wonderful author called Somini Sen Gupta. She's written a book called The End of Karma. There she says aspiration, which all of you have because you're young, you aspire to reach heights. Aspiration is like water. It needs a place to go, or else it drowns everything in its path. So you all need a place to go. So our young people today have a lot of aspiration ahead. So older people like us, we need to work with you and are happy to assist you in any way we can on this wonderful and exciting path that you all have ahead of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Uh, it was a pleasure to have heard your inputs on the pandemic and the progress in architecture. Thank you for giving us insights about architecture, life, and beyond. We would also like to thank our viewers for tuning in for this very insightful and inspirational fireside chat. Stay tuned for future Architect Summits events. Follow Shastra IIT Madras on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and help us spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Devansh.